early 2 months-ish. If there's no testosterone, it goes female. Right? So the counterparts. And so the labia majora would be like the scrotum minora, and the clitoris would be penis. Right? So testosterone determines which direction. You'll notice that blue erectile tissue that we saw with the corpus cavernosum and spongiosum for the penis, same thing for the clitoris. Okay, so then this is, of course, the vestibule here, the opening. Now the invaginations, the openings we need here, the urethra. So this is the external urethral orifice going up to the bladder. So that's always the most anterior. Then we have the opening to the vagina. And then this is also a counterpart. This is the greater vestibular gland or the Bertolin's gland, same thing. Similar to like Cowper, secreting like a mucus, liquid lubricant. Okay, so this is all the surface, and we also can see the vagina now having a kind of a rugae-ish surface. Do you remember the lining of the vagina? Stratified squamous. Stratified squamous. And up here now we see the neck of the uterus sort of descending a little bit into the vagina. And around the neck we have recesses called fornices. So this is the anterior fornix and the posterior fornix. Of course, it would be lateral on either side. So it's just a recess around the neck, around the actual cervix. This is the cervix itself, the neck of the uterus, and you have the external os, OS, which is at the beginning of the canal. This is the cervical canal, and then the internal os, which is the end of the canal. All right, so the cervical canal is sort of, it begins with the external os, it ends with the internal os, and then you go into the lumen of the uterus. What we see here is that the uterus is sort of bent anteriorly, antrovert. In older females, it could be retrovert. After pregnancy, sometimes it also can be tilted backward a bit. The uterus is very flexible in its location. It's held in place by a lot of ligaments. It's not fixed, It has to accommodate, certainly. So there are pouches here. The vesicouterine pouch is the pouch recess space between the uterus and the bladder. The vesicouterine pouch is right there. And then this space, this pouch, is the rectouterine pouch, between the uterus and the rectum. So that's pretty much everything here on the, okay, also, I think you do see this, you may not see it on the frontal view. I mentioned there are many ligaments holding it in place. This is one of them here, the uterosacral ligament, holding the uterus to the sacrum. So I don't know if we're going to see that on a frontal view, the uterosacral ligament. This is now the frontal view of the uterus. Okay, so again, here's the vagina, here's the neck of the uterus, the cervix, so external os, cervical canal, internal os. Now we go into the actual lumen of the uterus. The wall of the uterus, is going to, it's all metrium. And so you have the perimetrium around it. Myometrium is the wall itself, the muscular wall. And then endometrium is the lining. We'll be spending a lot of, we have 2 slides of the endometrial lining here. So this is the body of the uterus, and then this bulge here is the fundus, right? That language like the stomach. All right, so the fundus is here, this is the body. Coming off bilaterally, superiorly of the uterus, we have the 2 uterine tubes, or the fallopian tubes. And these have some regions to them. One is the isthmus, which is the narrow region, at the beginning of the fallopian or the uterine tube. Then as it continues, it broadens to the ampulla, and then it broadens more at the infundibulum, right here. And coming off of that are the fimbriae, the finger-like projections that sort of sweep the egg up into the uterine tube. And these, of course, are the ovaries. And the ovaries are connected to the body of the uterus via the ovarian ligaments. So these are the ovarian ligaments connecting the ovaries to the uterus. We now have a lot of connective tissue because there are many ligaments and connective tissue holding the uterus in place. So this whole unit here is called the broad ligament. The broad ligament, literally broad, is like a tent of connective tissue that covers all of this. And within the broad ligament, we have some specific areas. Right over here, over the superficial surface of the ovary, is the mesovarium. And the mesovarium is where I have it on a model. You'll see all the blood vessels for the ovary are within here, right, the mesovarium. This portion of the broad ligament is the mesosalpinx. That's the one that's supporting the uterine tube. So the mesosalpinx is up here, mesovarium is here, and the rest of this sheet here of the broad ligament, this is the mesometrium. Mesometrium. So this is all, I guess you could think of it almost like mesentery, but it's more specifically to the pelvic region. So it has all of these special names. Right, so broad ligament is all of it. Mesometrium is the majority. Mesovarium is over the ovary, and mesosalpinx is under the uterine tube. We saw the uterosacral ligament. Here now is the round ligament, and so uterosacral attaches it posteriorly. The round ligament here is going to anchor the uterus anteriorly to the labia majora. All right, so this is the round ligament that goes anteriorly. This is the suspensory ligament up here, literally holding it up, suspensory ligament. All right, so that's holding it up superiorly. So that's really attached to the uterine tube, but that whole attachment is a superior attachment. So we have posterior, we have anterior, we have superior. There's also a cervical ligament. There's like 7 or 8 different ligaments. Right? But those are the major ones, and the ones that you'll see on the models, the ones that I just showed you. All right, we're going to have to spend some time with the ovary because that's where all the action is. And in general, this is oogenesis now, like spermatogenesis with the sperm. Now it's all oogenesis. And so this would be the ovary, and we'll go in more detail, of course, but just in general to show you there's this sequential, oogenesis, where you have like, the oogonia, the stem cells, and then they become primary oocytes, secondary oocytes. And the thing with the female, there's a lot of similarity. It's meiosis. That's the same, it's meiosis. However, it starts and stops. It's not like the male where it's continuous. So basically, at this point, this is ovulation, when the egg is ovulated. The oocyte is arrested in prophase. It's arrested in metaphase 2. Right? So it actually stops here at metaphase 2. And if it's not fertilized, it never continues and completes meiosis 2. So that's a big difference. And the other, we'll see there's a few differences too. The pink cell here is the actual oocyte. All of the brown around it, this is the follicle. You know, so these are the cells that are going to support the oocyte, provide the hormones, the nutrients. What do you think the counterpart is in the male? Sertoli. Remember, in the testis we had Sertoli cells providing testosterone and, you know, nutrients, protection, all of that. Well, these oocytes require that also, and the follicle does that for them. So we have to look at the follicle, which also varies. Right. And then at ovulation, what was the follicle becomes this body. This is called the corpus luteum. Right. This stays in the ovary, and then, you know, this is going to keep producing hormones like progesterone in particular to keep the uterine lining viable with the potentially fertilized egg. Right, so this is the overview. So we have to look at oogenesis briefly, and then we'll see how it plays out in the ovary. So just to remind you about remember meiosis. Okay, so you need a stem cell, right? So with the male, we had spermatogonia. Now with the female, it's oogonia. Everything is two O's, right? Oogonia. So that's the stem cell. Now we're in the ovary, and so we're just going to look at the oocyte right now. The stem cell then becomes a primary oocyte, right, which is diploid. And the primary oocyte is now going to start meiosis, and it finishes prophase 1. What happens in prophase 1? Right, crossing over, really important. That happens before birth. So this is really different with the female. With the male, remember, this only happened after puberty. Right? With the female, all of the eggs, all of the oocytes in the female baby that's born, already the genetic variation has taken place. So what's the clinical or physiological significance of that? That already the variation has taken place at birth. What does the ovary not need that the testis does need? Thinking Think immune system.
Oh, that's the Sertoli stuff.
The barrier. Remember, testis has a blood testis barrier because the sperm are new cells that the immune system hasn't seen. You don't need that with the female. The immune system is seeing all of these and doesn't, it's not going to attack them. All right, so this is at birth. And this is where it stops. All right, so it's a primary oocyte arrested at birth in prophase 1. And then at puberty, now, with estrogen, counterpart of testosterone, you're going to now trigger the completion or the progression of meiosis. So from prophase 1, then it will finish the first meiotic division, and you end up with one primary, you get 2 secondary oocytes. But again, it's something different. Look at the secondary oocytes. 1, 2, but they don't look similar because one takes all the cytoplasm, and one is called a polar body. Very different from the male, the one primary spermatocyte, 2 secondaries. They look similar. They have different genetic information, but the cells look the same. Very different. One cell takes all the cytoplasm. This polar body is just the nucleus, that's all. And it's not viable, so it basically gets disintegrated, dissolved, recycled. Right? So this is the only viable one. This now, secondary oocyte, will go to metaphase 2, and that's it. That's as far as it gets. It will be ovulated, and if a sperm does not penetrate it, that's the end of it, and it will not continue. Only if a sperm penetrates it will that trigger the rest of the meiotic, second division, so that you end up with the 4 gametes. Right? This one can also divide just to finish the machinery. But when this one divides, again, only one takes the cytoplasm. So with oogenesis, you get 4 gametes, like spermatogenesis, but with spermatogenesis, the 4 are equal in size, and here you only get 1 viable gamete, right? 1 viable, the ovum. These 3 are not viable. So that's another big, there's quite, meiosis is basically the same. It's all about separating, getting down to haploid with genetic variation, but with the female, there's quite a few differences on stop, it starts and stops, and you only get 1. All right, so if we, and also I just should show you here, this is just the oocyte. Remember the supportive cells, the follicle. So the follicle changes. This is before birth. It's called the primordial follicle. It hasn't done anything yet. It's just 1 layer thick, simple squamous, and that's the only covering of the primary oocyte before birth and up until puberty. That's it. But with puberty now, what do you think the hormone is called that's going to trigger the follicle? Follicle stimulating hormone, right? FSH, you gotta love that, right? So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is now going to stimulate these cells, the support cells. And so first it's primary, it goes from simple squamous to cuboidal, right? That's the beginning, primary. And then they grow. When you have 2 or more layers of it, it's a growing follicle with FSH. And now these are going to be called granulosa cells when you have double layers like that. These are the cells that are now producing estrogen, progesterone. They're supporting the oocyte. And from the primary, you become secondary, and then this is the mature, late stage secondary. This is called the vesicular follicle or the Graafian follicle. And this is getting ready for ovulation. So the oocyte is like off sequestered up on like a stalk, and this is how it's going to be ovulated. It will take out with it some of its granulosa cells, which will be called corona radiata. We're going to look at that. And then what's left here, these cells are left in the ovary, and they're going to be called the corpus luteum. All right, so we'll put that in the ovary, and we'll see what it looks like. So this is in the ovary. All right, so the ovary itself, it does have, strangely enough, 1 layer of cells, cuboidal cells, called the germinal epithelium. They're not germinating, I don't know why they call it that, but that's just the covering. And then deep to that you have, in albicans, albuginea, same thing, all right? It's that white, all right, the tunica albuginea, that's that white covering of the actual ovary. What's over here? What am I?
It connects it to the body of the ovarian ligament.
If my arm is the ovarian ligament, and the ovarian ligament is holding the ovary, what am I?
The body of the uterus.
Uterus, right? Just get your bearing. All right, so the uterus is here, I'm holding up the ovary on that side, there would be an ovary over there. Okay, so this is the suspensory ligament, would be pulling it, suspending it, anchoring it, superiorly. All right, so this is an organ, and you have a cortex and out here where most of the cells are developing, and then the medulla is where the blood supply pretty much is entering. So out in the cortex, I have the model that corresponds to this somewhere. I showed you. So there's all sorts of activity here. And when you see one of these small follicles, those are the primordial. They're the ones that are there before birth, and they contain the primary oocyte. Then you see a primary follicle, which is when it turns cuboidal, and then the primary becomes secondaries. You see, when you have multiple layers, and they're called granulosa cells. The secondary then becomes a mature vesicular or Graafian follicle, right, where it's filled with fluid. That's another sign of it. You have a lot of fluid in here, and the oocyte is on the stalk, so to speak. And also, one thing that happens here in late secondary is that you get this zona pellucida, this clear membrane around the oocyte. Right? So when it's ovulated, this oocyte is in metaphase 2. It has a zona pellucida around it, that clear membrane, and then it has the granulosa cells around that, which are now the corona radiata. That's how it leaves the ovary. These granulosa cells that stay become the corpus luteum, this yellow body. Corpus luteum produces progesterone to keep the uterine lining going, thinking that this might get fertilized and implant in the uterine lining. If it does not happen, then the corpus luteum becomes a corpus albicans, a white body, which is like a scar tissue. So I have the model to correspond to that. We'll be looking at that. We have 2 slides. We have, I could do 3. The vagina would be stratified squamous. What? I don't know if I'm putting that. I never liked that slide. Too pale. Right, that's stratified. It's like that very pale pink. I don't really see much on it. But you should know the vagina is lined with stratified squamous. This is the endometrium, right, the lining of the uterus. So, uterine artery coming in. This language should sound familiar. After the uterine artery, it's going to branch into the arcuate. Arcuate. Coming off of that is cortical radiate. No, radial. All right, same thing. Not cortical radiate. I'm sorry. Just radial. Just radial. Coming off the artery is just a radial artery. This region here is referred to as the stratum basalis. So after the smooth muscle, of course, then you get into the stratum basalis of the endometrium. Basalis always stays, so the straight, these straight vessels are always pretty much going to stay. But after that, they are going to, some of them are going to branch off into these coiled arteries, right? And this now is in a layer of the endometrium called the stratum functionalis. The stratum functionalis, this upper layer here, all of this, is the tissue that's going to slough off at the end of every menstrual cycle. So the basalis stays, right? So this blood supply stays, but from here up. And so pretty much what happens is when hormonal concentrations change and the levels change, these blood vessels lose their nutrients and they start to kink up and then basically release the blood, hemorrhaging, and then all of this comes off, right? Lack of oxygen. So also what you'll find, which is on the slide, we have the formation of these glands. Right? So this would be the beginning of the menstrual cycle. You have the invagination here, the beginning of these straight glands. All right, so when you see a straight gland like that, that tells you it's in the beginning of the menstrual cycle. The glands are just forming. All right, so that would be the first slide. The second slide now would be post-ovulatory. So this is basically the menstrual cycle. This is what's happening in the ovary, right, at ovulation. So here, the first 5 days, of course, are the sloughing off, getting rid of the old tissue and then starting the new. So this is the proliferative stage. This is now when estrogen coming out of the granulosa cells is starting this up, and you have the beginning of the straight glands. All right, so on the slide, the proliferative slide is pre-ovulatory. It is under the duress, or the, under regulation of estrogen, the building, and it's building the straight glands. That's what you'll see. The second slide is the secretory phase, and that's after ovulation. And what you see here is that those same straight glands become very filled with nutrients. So whereas you have a straight gland, that's going to become like this. All right? It'll be filled with nutrients. All of this gland now fills up. And this is really more progesterone that's doing this, to keep the endometrial lining supportive for the potential implantation of a fertilized egg. Okay, so these would be the two slides, proliferative and secretory of the endometrial lining, and it's all about the functionalis layer, because this whole layer will come off if there's no fertilization. So that's pretty much that. So we have many, the mid-sat. A lot of these. We have two purple ones. We have, like the males, and they're all the same. So I'm going to do one, but they're all exactly the same. So we have here. All right, so the labia majora, labia minora, clitoris, the urethra to the bladder. Here's the vagina. I don't see a calcium gland on here. I have to look and see if it's on the other one. The other one, bingo. Okay, so then you have the posterior fornix, the anterior fornix. This is the actual cervix here. So you have the external os, the cervical canal, and then the internal os. Here's your wall of the uterus, perimetrium, myometrium, endometrium, rectouterine pouch, vesicouterine pouch. This is the round ligament here, the ovarian ligament going to the ovary, and the uterine tube, infundibulum, and then fimbriae. This is the secondary O site in metaphase 2. This is at ovulation. And when it ovulates, this is the zona pellucida, the green, the zona pellucida, and this is all the corona radiata. This is what were the granulosa cells in the ovary. When it releases, this is what the sperm have to get through. The acrosomal enzymes have to break all this down. So this is the corona radiata. And speaking of that, okay, so as a female, it says stem cell. Female. Oh, gonia. Where is it? When is it? Pretty much, you know, it's before birth and after. That's under, you know, you're reading a lot about that now. They used to think that the female baby was born and it was finished making new eggs, but now there's consideration that maybe the stem cell is always there making new ones. I don't know, but you'll read about that. But so far, it's considered that the stem is pretty much done. Keep an open mind about that. And that the egg, whatever egg she's gonna have is done prophase 1 at birth. So, this is prophase 1, so this is all so that's stem, oogonia, this is primary oocyte, this is birth here. Primary oocyte to birth. Because to go from here to here, this is now puberty. Right? Puberty now would go from prophase and finish the first meiotic division, so now you have 2 secondary oocytes, but remember, one is all the cytoplasm, one is a polar body, and then that will continue to here. This is where it arrests in the female at ovulations, metaphase 2. So this is how it comes out. And then this may be as far as it gets. If there's no sperm, this is as far as it gets. It does not finish meiosis. Only with the sperm penetrating it will it continue to form, you know, the full 4. Well, I mean, this one polar body could have gone ahead, but that secondary would not finish its division without the sperm. And so here you get 4, you know, but one is the ovum and the other 3 are polar bodies. They're not viable. All right, so that you'll see is a male and a female. This one, remember I said didn't have too much on it, but with the female, it does show the polar bodies. So that's the only good thing I like about this, as far as the female. This is now a secondary oocyte. You know, this is the first meiotic division. So here, 1, 2, all right? But you see how the cytoplasm is divided unequally. So here's the first secondary oocyte, here's the second one, but one takes the cytoplasm. And then this one, it shows it can divide again just to finish the machinery. It's sort of programmed to continue. And then this one, now, only with the sperm, so you have to think that this one, the sperms hit this one, right? And then this would continue and here. And then it would have, you know, this would be the 3rd polar body, and then this is now the fertilized egg. So this at least shows the polar body activity. And then you have, this is probably the ovum here, haploid. All right, so here's the female gamete. This becomes this. Here's the sperm. And these 2 come together, and this is the actual zygote. So that's what's on that. Ovary, yes. All right, so here's the ovary. So what's this? Ovarian ligament. What's all this? Mesovarium. Mesovarium, see all the blood supply. Germinal epithelium, you know, puboidal cells here. This is all the cortex, here's the medulla. And then all of these are at a different place, so they're not in order. When you see something like this that's sort of nondescript, this is a primordial follicle, all right, with a primary oocyte in it. So these are primordials. So there's some here, there's some here, primordial, like early, you know, before birth. These are primary, All right, when you see the cuboidal, one layer, these are primary follicles. So now this is after puberty. This is the beginning of a secondary follicle, because these are multiplying, so these are like granulosa cells. And then, once fluid fills this, it's going to become a mature secondary follicle. All right, and so this is like the Graafian follicle, the very mature vesicular one. And here's the oocyte in metaphase 2 as it's ready to be ovulated. Okay. What happens here now, this all is left, and this becomes the corpus luteum, the yellow body. Corpus luteum is going to continue, if there's it'll continue until the placenta picks up with the hormonal supply. All right, so it could last until the placenta if there's fertilization. If there's no fertilization, the luteum first becomes this. This is the corpus hemorrhagicum, hemorrhaging blood, see? So it'll first start to degenerate into this, the corpus hemorrhagicum, and then from here, it will degenerate into this scar tissue, the corpus albicans. So there's 1, 2, 3 corpus albicans on this. That's just, they just sort of, keep multiplying every month. All right, so that's the ovary. I think I showed you what we're doing.